This is the Loaded Radio Podcast.
All right, hey, it's Scott Penfold here with you, and this is another edition of the Loaded Radio Podcast, and another special one this week, man. Yeah, a great double bill, if you would, as I'm going to be joined by Eric Cutler from AUTOPSY, as AUTOPSY of the new album Morbidity Triumphant, which is available now. And as well, I'm going to be joined in the second half of the podcast by Devin Townsend, as Devin has got the new album Lightwork, which is just a phenomenal piece of work from Devin Townsend. But I mean, hey, of course, the cool thing is we're talking to both Eric Cutler and Devin Townsend this week. So, I mean, that's amazing, man. This is going to be a great show. So let's get down to it. Okay, first off, though, we're going to be speaking with this gentleman here. He is guitarist and vocalist for the iconic death metal band AUTOPSY. The new album Morbidity Triumphant is just everything you'd expect from an AUTOPSY album. Straight up brutality and tons of gore. It's just an awesome, awesome release with tracks like Final Frost and Knife Slice, Axe Chop. It's straight up everything you would expect from an AUTOPSY album, and it's certainly a pleasure to be speaking with this guy here, Eric Cutler from AUTOPSY. Eric, how you doing, man?
Oh, it's all good. It's all good, man. How you doing?
I'm great, thanks. I've spent the last hour listening to the new album, man, and Morbidity Triumphant. It's straight up AUTOPSY and a great release, man. I got to say, hands down.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
I mean, we're looking at 8 studio albums in, not counting EPs, of course. Now, was the album self-produced?
It was self-produced with Adam Munoz, our engineer. He helps out a little bit with that too, but we input all the main ideas. He helps with kind of sound a little bit, but otherwise, the four of us produced it.
So when the band is actually doing the production aspects of an album, is it like a group collective effort, or is it like individuals going in for certain songs? How does it really work that way?
Well, producing, kind of, we all have a hand in that. Greg's new, but he is an engineer, so he knows what he's doing with stuff. For a lot of the sounds right now, it's still probably me, Chris, and Danny on that aspect of it. Greg does have a lot of input. But he is still new. It's his first album he's been on with us. And so he probably doesn't do quite as much as he will probably start doing, because he's really fantastic at what he does. And but he did have a hand in stuff too. So I would say all four of us did, produced it. Cool, man. And just some of the tracks that I certainly want to bring up, one of them being Skin by Skin, a nice, slow, sludgy stuff. What can you tell me about that song? Skin by Skin was the first song that was first or second song probably written. No, it wasn't the first one. It's probably the second song. It was the first one I wrote for this album. And I wrote it in a different key originally. And one of the riffs in the song, when I wrote the riff, I really liked it and I wanted to incorporate it into the song, and it didn't fit in the key it was in. So I moved the key of everything else in the song, and it worked perfectly. And so it was a little tough at first, but once I figured out what I needed to do with it, it kind of flowed good. Another great track on there. A tune that I find, I guess in my opinion, that starts off with a heavy punk influence and then gets into that sludgy sort of sound that you guys have really just put your own mark on, which I think is awesome, is the song Knife Slice, Axe Chop. What can you tell me about that one? That one's kind of a classic AUTOPSY formula written song. I think it's the way the riffs are in it, and it was written kind of with horror in mind, the horror theme, that you have the lyrics on top of it, and all the other little stuff was kind of added on as we went, but kind of a groovy tune, too at times, but definitely. It kind of reminds me of like older sounding, stuff from us, but that one Chris wrote, and I think it was his, maybe a second one that he wrote for the album. Yeah, and you could have put that on Mental Funeral. It would have sounded like it belonged there. It's definitely that kind of early sound. You know what I mean? Yeah, right on. What wasn't our intention, but yeah, we've been hearing a lot of comparisons with that, and it's kind of neat, kind of cool to hear that. And now with this album in particular, I mean, would you say that there would be like a significant difference in its creation than there was with, say, Tourniquets, Hacksaws, and Graves? Or would you call this even an extension of the previous album? I would never say anything's an extension, because by the time we record something and go home and do whatever we do, shows and everything, and get back to writing and in the studio again. Nothing's ever an extension of anything, even if it sounds like it is, or it's intended to be. It's never our intention. So everything is kind of a whole new theme when we start again. And I would say this one is it's a lot different, because we were recording at Fantasy Studios and they shut down, unfortunately, and we moved on to a new studio. So everything about what we were doing was kind of different, same inside the mixing room, the same when we're playing together, but just had a different feel to it, because it was a completely different studio, and it still had Adam Munoz, engineering the album. So, we had that constant, but just being in a different place made it feel, different. So we went in and mixed the Live in Chicago record there. So that was our first time going in there. Fantasy had just shut down, and we wanted to mix that record and get it out.
Right.
And which a whole nother story on that, about all the shows being canceled and everything. And a live album was supposed to be from all the shows we did that year, but we got to do Chicago and then everything shut down. But so going to a new studio though made everything a kind of a whole different vibe and feel to it. And then having Greg too, in the band and recording with us, and a longtime friend. And, we've recorded his studio, Earhammer, all of us have recorded there, several times. And so it was a real natural thing to have him come into the band, but it felt all different in the studio, new studio. We haven't been here yet. We've been recording at Fantasy for years, and new bass player. And, we had Joe Trevisano since 2010. Yeah. So, that was a long time, for us having a bass player. And he was, he's our brother, still is. And him leaving and bringing Greg in, just everything about recording the last one was kind of different. And the pandemic, that was probably different. Everybody at home at times with, writing stuff and playing. And so everything about all this whole experience of the last album has been kind of different.
Certainly. And there's one thing that has certainly been constant with Autopsy is, just the horror based lyrics, and just Severed Survival was based. The name came from a Stephen King short story. Where do you pull that influence from, for that horror influence?
Well, just being, kids and growing up and watching horror movies and creature features and loving just that whole theme, and as we starting to grow into teenagers and get older, all of us, we still loved, watching horror movies and starting to play music and listening to heavy music. And it was kind of a natural thing just to kind of incorporate it. So it just felt like a music version of what a horror movie is, not necessarily a soundtrack to the movie, but just kind of the feel of what a really good, sick movie is, and like a music version of it.
Yeah. And that really takes me to some of your album covers, man. I mean, especially the latest one, just a great album cover too. Now, do you guys individually have a hand in the designs for the albums?
We've been using Wes Benscotter for a lot of stuff, and he's, just a really amazing artist. And, he's done lots of covers for other bands too. And so what we try to do to give him is some kind of an idea, an album title, something. And then we kind of let him come up with some ideas on his own. He'll send us some like pencil sketches, some simple stuff. We'll approve things. We'll tell him, hey, maybe add this or that, or he'll come back with something else added to it. And it kind of progresses in several emails of him adding and doing different things to his drawing until he comes to the point where it looks good and he's going to actually, create it. And so we try to give him a little bit of direction, but, most of it is him with, his twisted mind, just coming up with sick stuff. And he knows that we like, stuff that's going to be really, really sick looking too, to look at, so, with that in mind, he tries to, do everything he kind of thinks we would, like, because we've had a long relationship now working with him.
One of my favorite album covers is Severed Survival, man. Definitely such a creepy album cover. But even going back to that album, say, which is really just essential death metal listening, are there similar aspects from that period that Autopsy still integrates into the modern day albums?
So first of all, which Severed Survival cover are you talking about?
The doctors, the surgeons.
Okay. Kent Matthew one. Yeah. Original one. Okay, cool. All right. So, no, we all just kind of, whatever our kind of writing mood is, nobody kind of forces anything, and we don't have any kind of idea in mind of, okay, we want to sound like this or we want to do that, or or we should have more of this on the album. It should be slower. It should be faster. So there is no thought process really at all regarding kind of planning things out. It's everybody kind of does their own thing at home, writes their own riffs and stuff and puts their stuff together. We text or email the ideas back and forth. And when we get down to the jam room and start actually going over the songs, sometimes I'll make little tweaks to them and little changes, that on the spot that we think might, work better. But, otherwise it's, the formula is no formula. Really, we're just at home doing our own thing, coming up our own stuff and bring it all together and everybody do their own parts on the songs.
Certainly Autopsy, one of those bands that would be considered one of the pioneers from the pioneering era, at least, of death metal, the genre that is death metal. But listening to the band, of course, there are elements of punk, there's doom, there's sludge. All throughout the band's existence, really. Now, obviously, when Chris, from his recent departure back then of working with Chuck and Death, would you say what other genres or bands directly influenced Autopsy at the time and even today?
I think, being a musician, playing music, writing music, and if, some musicians don't listen to any music but ones that do, I think you kind of grab little things from everything, you listen to, and it doesn't necessarily have to sound like something, but you kind of grab little things. When we were younger, we kind of latched on to, heavier stuff. Black Sabbath was, huge influence, growing up and also growing up with punk and even for us as kids when thrash started, so you take all these themes and you don't necessarily try to take them because you don't ever pick up a guitar and go, okay, I want to write something that sounds like Merciful Fate. So, but those scenes come into you just because you enjoy them and you're going to get influenced by themes, and it's a natural theme that just happens. And you can say I'm influenced by, Black Sabbath, which I am. Michael Schenker was, when I was a kid and still is, I just idolized him, and I'm not Michael Schenker and I'm not playing Michael Schenker sounding music or UFO, right. But I'm influenced by him, and what he did. So you take these little themes, and they sneak in there and if you're able to pull it out of your head, you can use them in a good way without, trying to, just by, what comes to you.
Back into a little bit of the history. I got to bring up the album Mental Funeral, which I brought up before. It came out back in 91, which I'm a big fan of that album. And I remember when it came out, having that on cassette. Did you guys know, like when you were working on that album or when it first came out, that it would become so influential within the genre?
No, we had no idea. It was, even now, because, back then we'd only been around a couple of years and doing our thing, and the people where we lived in the Bay Area, most people hated death metal. They didn't know what it was yet. It just sounded noisy and lame to them. So we had no clue. We went over to Europe and toured, and the shows were really great. We were really surprised because we didn't know that, as many people knew what this was, but so no, back then it was, I'd have never guessed in a million years that, it would have turned out into what it did. But, it was a lot of fun making the record. It was probably more of a party than a recording, but
was it?
But we had no idea. So it's awesome. It's really cool that the scene's turned into what it has. And we got so much great music and bands out there that, that we had a part in this in the very beginning. It's an honor and it's really cool for us.
Now, when looking at the band, the lineup, of course, the one position that seems to have been one that can't really stay constant is the bass player position. Why do you think there's been some turnover with that position within the band?
Well, I don't have to think about it or guess. It's just the like you said, the personnel. So it's a matter of having, the right person that not only can play the music, but somebody who everybody gets along with too, and somebody who has a normal, life enough to where they can function on their own, and you don't have to provide everything, for them. So it's, we had great bass players, I think. And, at times we were all, great friends too. And I'm not unfriendly with anybody that was ever in the band playing bass. I don't talk to anybody that much, but, we're all still friendly, after the years and everything that's happened. But you got to get the right fit. You got to get somebody that's that can play the music and they enjoy it, and everybody enjoys each other's company, and you do kind of, you have similar interests and stuff, and it works better that way. So things fall apart sometimes, between people, especially when you get close with people, when you get really good friends with people, you're more like brothers, and and you can argue and you can fight and things can happen and people, go away. But, we did have Joe in the band for, a long time.
That's right.
So, so it's, he was a great guy, and, he played very well, and he fit in, he loved what he was doing with us, and everything's good. And he didn't leave the band on bad terms. He had a change in his life, and he moved, and we always wish him the best. We still talk to him, and everything's good. But I think up until Joe, we didn't have somebody that lasted any, long period of time. And it's just the way things are, with people, sometimes things just don't work out. And that's kind of what we went through for a while. But I think we're in good hands now with Greg. So.
Yeah, absolutely you are, man. But I did get to ask, was Steve Georgio ever an official member of Autopsy?
No, not really. I mean, he could have been, but we knew he was busy too, and we wanted to have somebody who would just be permanent, and Autopsy would be the main band. And with Steve in those days, Sadist was going to be his main band. It was a band he started. Yeah, and so we felt like he'll sit in and he'll help us out, and he'll play on the songs, and he'll do Killer. And, we'll joke around and laugh and be stupid together. But we do need to get somebody who can, step in and be the permanent person, because at that time we wanted to start touring and doing different things too. And Sadist was on the road to doing stuff too. And so we knew we probably needed to have somebody that could just be in the band permanent. You look now, Steve plays in how many bands and so many people do, you're like, oh yeah, we could easily work it out to where, you figure out schedules and different stuff. But, that was in today's now.
Awesome. Eric, thanks again so much, man. It's been an absolute honor talking to you. It really, really has. Thank you again so much.
Awesome, man. Great talking to you. Thank you.
All right. All the best. We'll see you soon. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fingers crossed, man. We'll catch you.
Take care, buddy.
All right. You too, man. Bye-bye.
And that's Eric Cutler from Autopsy. Just really so cool to be able to talk to Eric Cutler, man. That was awesome. And again, don't forget, Autopsy have the new album out now, Morbidity Triumphant, If Death Metal Is Your Thing. And these guys, some of the pioneers, certainly of the era, of the genre that is death metal. It's Scott Penfold here with you, though. And we continue the podcast, a special one again this week, as we connect now with Devin Townsend. Of course, Devin Townsend is a longtime frontman for Strapping Young Lad, the Devin Townsend Project, even working with Steve Vai back in the 90s on the Vai album, which I think is still one of my favorite albums from the 90s. But Devin Townsend has a new album out now called Lightwork, and it is a bit of a departure from what you would expect from Devin, but again, he's just following his own groove, and it just works so well. Some really, really great stuff on here. Devin, thanks for joining us on the Loaded Radio podcast this week.
How's it going, buddy?
I really want to get into Lightwork with you here, man. First off, I really want to ask, why the decision to work with Garth Richardson as a producer on this one?
Well, I've known him for many years, and we live in the same place. We're both in Vancouver. Yep. And during the pandemic, when we couldn't go anywhere, it offered me an opportunity to try out this process that I've been interested in trying for many years, having another person objectively on board. And it was a very difficult process, but one that if it was ever going to happen, it was like a perfect opportunity,
Yeah, certainly so. I mean, and you just mentioned that the album was created throughout the pandemic. Now, from my listening to it, from the tracks I've heard off it, and of course, listening to you for many years, from Strapping Young Lad, Devin Townsend Project, to me, it seems very much like a reflection, a very emotional, reflective album. Am I coming at that right? Is it a very personal album for you?
Yeah, they all are, to be fair. Sure. I don't know. I've made one that hasn't been, but I think what's also interesting with this and in doing the interviews and being compelled to reflect on it, so much of a musician's output ends up becoming a snapshot of and a representation of their identity from record to record. And for me, because everything I do is a reaction to what came before and what was going on in my life, The music functions in a way that I'm slightly less comfortable with that because it always changes. It's always fluid. Sure. And the album itself is, of course, it's like an optimistic and personal sort of hopeful thing. And some of the interviews that I've done, they've expressed confusion as to why it would be that coming through a pandemic. Like, why would you have something like this as opposed to something that was chaotic and heavy and right. all this? And frankly, man, I just didn't have the energy for that. I'm thinking every day in my life over the past year, like yours, like everybody, it's chaos. And because music serves a very practical function in my life as a way to reflect on what's going on, whenever I hit play on my computer, I wanted to be hit with something that helped that for me personally. I didn't want to make it more chaotic. I didn't want to make it heavier. It was heavy enough. Thank you very much. So I went out of my way to make something that was a little bit more reflective based on the cathartic nature of it. I was able to have a moment of respite during this chaos by working on this music. And that was the reason.
How did the pandemic affect you personally, Devin? Did you have dealings with depression, anything like that? How did you personally deal with that?
Sure, man. Of course. All of that and more, like you, like everybody. I mean, there's been a few people that I've talked to that are either sociopaths or lying that have been like, I'm being facetious. Maybe some of them are the case, but they're like, man, I loved it. It was great for me. I'm thinking, really? Did we go through the same thing? Because holy shit. Although my world, I managed to keep a reasonable degree of balance during it, but it didn't go without effort. But it's not just me. I'm having to deal with the people around me and my family and my parents and my sisters and, like all these kids and going to the store, all these things. I can't imagine that any of us have had a significantly different experience. It was all chaos for all of us. And because we're locked away in a lot of ways, our outlet becomes social media, which is a cesspool. So our reality scheme and we can be forgiven for thinking that the entire world is imploding based on the fact that our only communication with that outside world is one that insists that we're terrified all the time. So I found that for me, the fatigue of just trying to navigate that resulted in this record where I thought, the boldest statement I can make for myself in this time is to make something that doesn't play into it in some way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the songs really come across that way, Devin. I mean, first off, let's talk about the song Moon People. Where did that song come from for you?
Well, it's also interesting, and I apologize for talking so much, but it's what I do.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, I don't know, man. And I've been doing interviews for the past week and a half, and so many of the interviews are saying, well, this song, what's it about? Or what do you mean by this? And I don't know. All I do when I write is I go on feel and I write words that seem to make sense to me. And then I refine them to the point where certain words don't bother me anymore, and at the end of it, what is it about? I don't know. What is it meant to represent? I don't know. There's no ulterior motive. It's just simply words that seem to work for me. And Moon People just seemed like a lovely phrase. And the more I started working on it, the more I can sort of extrapolate meaning from it. And I think for the sake of not just pleading the fifth on every song I write, I've been compelled to expand on what I mean. And I think Moon People is probably about those of us who are not maybe as extroverted, maybe not as vocal about our opinions. And I talk to people about that, and there's two methods of thought there. Is one, just say, well, you're being wishy-washy by not using your platform to express opinions on the injustices of the world and all this. And I can totally relate to that. And there's others saying that, artists should just shut up and play their music and have no rights to opinions in a lot of ways. And I, to a degree, I can understand where people are coming from who may express that. But more so for me, I'm just like, man, I'm so confused by it all. It's all so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And it's like my identity tends to be pretty fluid as I go through things. And I realize that I don't pay a whole lot of attention to politics. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to religion. I don't. It's not that I feel like I'm being negligent or anything. I don't have time. I don't have interest. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the whole moon people idea for me is like, people are kind of watching all this stuff, like watching all the political and social division and just being more like astounded by it than feeling the need to have some opinions on it. I mean, it's not that I don't have opinions on it. It's just, it's like, it's so nuanced, man, all this stuff, not everything, of course, but I guess my whole point with moon people is I tend to be so blown away by everything that I often I'm on the sidelines going, what the hell is going on? And I guess that's what that song represents. But again, I'll say this, a lot of the explanations I give for this song are only because I'm being asked, more so than having an actual answer. So next time we talk, I may feel differently about that. Maybe moon people are about people that live on the moon. I don't know.
Well, I did want to piggyback on that and bring up the song Call of the Void, which I think is just an absolutely beautiful song. I love Call of the Void. I mean, just even as a standalone piece of work, I think it's beautiful. It's so well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I really do too. That's a really calming piece of music for me. And I remember the intention while I was writing it, as I had mentioned in the beginning, of trying to find ways to calm myself down because of the anxiety and the chaos and all of this. I wrote songs with that as its underlying intent. And Call of the Void, I remember that song in particular, every time I turned it on while I was working on it, I'd be like, oh, good, this one. All right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it was like a cool drink for me. And so in fact, it was hard to finish it too, because I didn't want to stop working on it. I like listening to it. Right. So yeah.
Now, why did you decide to separate Lightwork and Nightwork and not just release, like, say, a double album or a larger project?
It's the same reason I do bonus records with every one of the releases I've done recently. Basically, how I write, and this goes back to the lyrics, is I'll have a moment that makes me participate in, some sort of emotion, whether or not it's good or bad or otherwise. It's like a moment that I can identify with like a real vague sense of what it is, but I'm not clever or perceptive enough to be able to define it immediately. So what I do is I write constantly. And the idea is to try and stumble across something that accidentally fits into that vibe. And so I might go 15, 20 songs, and all of a sudden something will occur. And I think probably Call the Void was one of the first ones with this, that I'm able to say, okay, that reminds me of that moment that was significant enough for me to want to write a record about. And then it all becomes, it's like searching in the dark for things. You go down rabbit holes trying to find things, and then you realize that maybe that wasn't right. And then you go back and you go to a different direction, and then you start to whittle it down. And from almost the very beginning, I work with artists so we can hand in hand get the art together. But it's never like a clear statement right out of the top. It's about figuring it out and finding it. And the process of doing that yields tons of music that I take to 80% usually in a demo stage. Mm-hmm. And then by the end, there's just a bunch left over. And it's not that it's songs that I don't like. It's not that it's songs that are essentially unfinished, although some may be. It's just, it didn't fit the aesthetic that I was searching in the dark for. And some people say, well, does that extend into the next record? And the last thing I'll say about this is oftentimes the reason why I write a song doesn't remain valid or relevant after that period is over. So just putting it out makes sense to me.
Just looking back at your entire career, I did want to ask, just strictly as a fan of yours, is the book completely closed on Strapping Young Lad?
Yeah, I mean, it has been for 25 years, right? I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind for me, is the same motivation that I had to write Lightwork at the age of 50 was the same driving force that I had to write City at the age of 25.
Right.
The process hasn't changed, but I have. And that's the whole point, in my opinion, of being alive, is like learning, right? You learn, and specifically if what that was rooted in when I was younger was things that were causing me problems, it'd be absurd for me to try not to solve those. And then once you do solve them, that music doesn't exist in the same way. The process exists in the same way, but it's not going to come out the same way.
Sure.
The way that I wrote Ghost or Snuggles or Ziltoid or Transcendence, it's the same process that was relevant back in Strapping. It just yielded different things because it was a different time. So I play Strapping stuff live every now and then. It's fine because it's still important to me. But the problem with it is it's a slippery slope. If I go to do it, then people are going to be so keen that the problems that existed that led me to break up the band are just going to come back. It's like, I don't want that to be my sole identity, because it was a part of my identity and it is now a small part of my identity. And by focusing on it, the people who like it so much that you just end up being trapped by it. Like that's what happened with me, right? Like, and then whenever I go to do something that compels me in a different direction, the audience for that at the time was just like, I don't know, man. It seemed like the parameters for expression seemed to become more and more narrow the more I was doing it, right? And plus, almost the foundation of what is important to me about being a musician at this point is to be authentic with people. Because I honestly feel that so much of the industry is fine without authenticity. As long as it's heavy, as long as it's, got a good snare sound, it's like, not everything, of course, but a lot of it is like, you don't have to do that, right? And you can still find a degree of success if you're talented. But I think the audience I've been fortunate enough to accumulate over the years, and lose, depending, are there a lot of which, because I'm not lying to you, this is where I'm at. This is what I feel. This is what I want to do. And if I was to recreate that kind of vibe, like from half a lifetime ago, it's not authentic to me because it's not where I'm at, man. It's like, it's not what I'm feeling. And every now and then I'll write a heavy song, like I did Hear Me on Empath. And there's a couple songs on Nightwork that are a little heavier. I'll be perfectly honest, I never listen to heavy music anymore either. It's like, if I've created a career based on authenticity, it doesn't make sense for me.
Looking back at your time with Steve Vai, did you still talk with Steve? And would you ever consider doing anything with Steve again?
Yeah, that's a different scenario because our relationship has evolved, right? And we both evolved musically, I feel, too. Steve's a great friend, man. He's a friend and a brother and a mentor and all these things. And but we're also on different pages musically. I mean, let's be honest. It's sometimes we stumble upon things together that make sense, but also we collaborated on a couple of songs over the course of the pandemic and prior to that. And a lot of times I think he'd agree when we listen to the songs back, it sounds like here's Dev's part, here's Steve's part, here's Dev's part, here's Steve's part. And it's not a song as much as two people who are vision-based writers who care for each other, participating with each other. Right. And for the intent of why I create music, I find I don't relate to it particularly much. Not that I dislike it, because I hear my friend on there and I think it's musically really cool. But oftentimes I'm like, yeah, but it's not sticking with me in the ways that the stuff that I write on my own does.
Yeah.
Not that it's better or worse. I'm just saying about how I perceive it, right?
Because Sex and Religion was just such a monster. I mean, it was such a monster album to me. And I think there's so many people out there that would just love to consume more of that. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of people that want to consume things that they can't get.
Yeah.
And it's like you can yell at people until they're traumatized, but you're still not going to get it. You know what I mean? It's like being at a buffet and all the shrimp is gone. There's no more shrimp. No more shrimp, man. Sorry, shrimp's done for the day. And it's the equivalent of somebody standing in front of the shrimp bucket screaming at the wait staff. You know what I mean? And they're just like, guys, I'm so sorry, man. Like, really, I know you're bummed, but there's no more fucking shrimp, you know? Like, and sex and religion for me was a contentious is the wrong word, but it was a complicated record for me emotionally because I was a kid and I was singing somebody else's lyrics and I didn't relate to it, you know? And it's like, I love the experience. I love Steve, but, and it's hard as well when you express to somebody that you don't relate to things in the way that they do. There's some people that are like, that makes perfect sense. That's a human reaction. We're different people. But there's also a whole faction of people going, no, this doesn't make sense to me. Because I like it and you don't, there's clearly a disconnect here. And you're like, no, we're just different, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Devin, it's been an honor, my friend. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to talk to you again, man. I could talk to you all day. It's just so easy.
Buddy, well, I'm sure we will. See you soon.
All the best to you.
Bye-bye.
All right, there he is, Devin Townsend. The new album is called Lightwork, and as well, you can pick up Nightwork as well. Just some phenomenal sounding stuff from, I think, just an incredible songwriter. A great listen front to back. But it's Scott Penfold here with you, and we're about to wrap things up here for another edition of the Loaded Radio podcast. And don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for all your hard rock and metal news, updated constantly. Also, the 24-hour radio station is there for you, too. Yes, we stream metal 24/7 and even have live personalities on the station there for you as well. Also, you can check out past editions of the Loaded Radio podcast at loadedradio.com as well. And that should do it for this week. So on behalf of myself and everybody else at Loaded Radio and loadedradio.com, we'll talk to you again next week for an all-new edition of the Loaded Radio podcast.
Loaded Radio.